The most embarrassing moment of my life did not happen in front of the entire school. It happened because my grandmother quietly opened a barn door at exactly the wrong time. I can still remember the sound of the old wooden hinges before either Logan or I had enough time to step back. My face felt hotter than the summer sun outside, while Logan looked completely frozen, as if even breathing had suddenly become the most difficult thing in the world. Grandma stood there holding a folded umbrella in one hand and 2 clean towels in the other. She looked at me. Then she looked at Logan. Then her eyes drifted toward the basket of freshly picked strawberries we had abandoned on the floor beside us. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. I was convinced my heart had stopped beating. Logan lowered his head slightly, clearly preparing himself for the worst possible conversation. Instead, Grandma sighed softly and smiled in the same calm way she always did whenever I accidentally tracked muddy boots across her kitchen floor. "Dinner is going to get cold if you boys stay out here much longer," she said before turning around and walking back toward the farmhouse as though she had interrupted nothing more dramatic than 2 teenagers organizing boxes. Logan remained completely still. I slowly turned toward him, and for the first time since I had known him, the boy everyone at Westbrook High believed feared absolutely nothing looked completely terrified. "I think I just survived the scariest moment of my life," he whispered. I almost laughed, but the nervous feeling inside my chest refused to disappear. We followed Grandma toward the house in complete silence. Every step across the familiar dirt path somehow felt heavier than the last. The warm evening breeze carried the sweet smell of ripe strawberries across the fields, but even my favorite place in the world suddenly felt unfamiliar. When we reached the back porch, Logan stopped walking. He stared toward the screen door without saying anything. "You do not have to come inside if you are uncomfortable," I told him quietly. He looked at me with an uncertain smile. "I promised I would help your grandmother today. Running away now would make everything worse." I admired that about him. Even when he was scared, he still wanted to do the right thing. We stepped into the kitchen together. The smell of homemade chicken pot pie filled the room, and Grandma moved comfortably between the stove and the table as though nothing unusual had happened. She asked me to place the lemonade on the table before asking Logan if he preferred mashed potatoes or roasted vegetables. Her voice sounded perfectly normal. Mine did not. I answered every question with awkward one-word replies while trying to avoid looking at Logan. Somehow that only made everything even more uncomfortable. Logan quietly thanked Grandma for inviting him to dinner and offered to help carry the serving dishes. She accepted his help with an easy smile. Watching them together confused me even more. If Grandma was upset, she certainly was not showing it. During dinner, ordinary conversations somehow became the hardest conversations I had ever experienced. Grandma talked about the upcoming strawberry festival, asked me whether school assignments were becoming more difficult, and complimented Logan for repairing the broken irrigation pipe earlier that afternoon. Logan answered every question politely, but I noticed he kept holding his fork a little tighter whenever Grandma smiled at him. The silence between each conversation felt longer than it really was. Finally, Grandma placed her glass of iced tea on the table and folded her hands together. She looked directly at Logan with the same gentle expression she had worn all evening. "Logan," she said calmly, "what exactly are your intentions with my grandson?" At that exact moment, I realized dinner had only just begun. 3 days earlier, life had felt wonderfully simple, even if neither Logan nor I knew what to call whatever was quietly growing between us. Ever since the academic assembly, spending time together had become the most natural part of every school day. He still met me outside English class without saying much, but somehow I always knew he would be there. Some afternoons we stopped by the little coffee shop near campus, and other days we simply walked through town without any destination, talking about music, old movies, or the strange habits of our teachers. The rumors around school had never completely disappeared, but they had become little more than distant background noise. At least that was what I kept telling myself. Monday morning began like every other school day. Mason waved at me across the hallway before noticing Logan walking beside me. Instead of teasing us, he simply smiled and said, "See you guys in class." That tiny moment surprised me more than I wanted to admit. Maybe people really were beginning to move on. During lunch, Logan quietly placed a small paper bag beside my tray without saying a word. I opened it and immediately laughed. Inside was my favorite blueberry muffin from the bakery near the town square. You remembered, I said. He shrugged as though it were nothing important. You always buy the last one before school when they still have it. I looked at him in disbelief. You actually noticed that? He glanced down at his lunch before answering. I notice a lot of things. My heart somehow felt lighter for the rest of the afternoon. It was such a small gesture, yet nobody had ever paid attention to details like that before. After classes ended, I drove toward my grandmother's strawberry farm like I usually did during the week. Logan followed in his own car because he had promised to help repair several old wooden tables before the annual strawberry festival. Grandma greeted him with the same warm smile she always did and immediately handed him a pair of work gloves. I hear you are good at fixing things, she said. Logan smiled politely. I will do my best. For the next 2 hours, we worked side by side beneath the warm afternoon sun. We sanded rough edges, tightened loose screws, replaced broken boards, and laughed whenever one of us accidentally covered the other with sawdust. Every now and then I caught Logan smiling without realizing it. Those quiet smiles had become my favorite part of every day because they only appeared when he forgot about the reputation he carried everywhere else. Later that afternoon, Grandma asked us to organize empty strawberry baskets inside the storage barn before the weekend festival. The barn was cool and shaded, filled with the comforting scent of fresh wood and ripe strawberries waiting to be packed the following morning. We stacked baskets together while sunlight streamed through narrow windows high above us. As I reached for another wooden crate, I noticed a small notebook lying beside Logan's backpack. I recognized it immediately because I had seen him carrying it at school for weeks. Before I could look away, a loose page slipped free and drifted gently onto the floor between us. I bent down to pick it up, expecting homework or rough notes. Instead, I found a carefully drawn pencil sketch of Grandma's strawberry field beneath the evening sky. Standing near the center of the drawing was a familiar figure wearing a light blue hoodie. Even without seeing the face clearly, I knew it was me. My hands froze as I stared at the page. Logan stepped forward almost instantly, his expression filled with quiet panic rather than anger. He gently took the drawing back, closed the notebook, and let out a slow breath. Then he looked directly into my eyes and spoke so softly I almost missed the words. I drew it the night after I first came here, because it was the first place that ever felt like home. For a few seconds, neither of us said another word. Logan held the notebook against his chest as though it contained something far more important than a simple drawing, while I continued staring at him, trying to understand what he had just admitted. You called this place home, I finally said. He nodded slowly but kept his eyes on the wooden floor. I know it probably sounds strange. No, I answered immediately. It does not sound strange at all. He let out a quiet breath that almost sounded like relief. The afternoon sunlight slipped through the narrow windows of the old barn, painting long golden lines across the wooden floor between us. Outside, I could hear the gentle hum of insects and the distant sound of my grandmother humming while she picked strawberries with a small basket hanging from her arm. Everything around us felt peaceful, but I could tell Logan was fighting a battle inside himself that nobody else could see. I was embarrassed, he admitted after another long silence. I never meant for you to see that sketch. I smiled softly. Why not? He looked toward the open barn door before answering. Because if someone draws a place over and over again, it usually means they are afraid of losing it. His words settled quietly inside my heart. Until that moment, I had believed Logan was simply becoming comfortable around my grandmother and me. I had never considered that he might already be afraid of everything disappearing. I leaned against one of the wooden shelves and folded my arms. You are always worrying about tomorrow, I said. Have you ever noticed that? He laughed quietly. Probably. Then stopped thinking about tomorrow for 1 minute. He looked back at me with curious blue eyes. What should I think about instead? I smiled. Right now. He glanced around the barn, taking in the baskets, the rows of fresh strawberries, the old wooden beams, and the warm afternoon light filling every corner. Then he looked at me again. This time his smile reached his eyes. Right now is not so bad. I laughed. See? That was not difficult. Before he could answer, Grandma's cheerful voice floated through the open doorway. Boys, if you finished organizing those baskets, I could use a little help outside. We carried the empty baskets into the field together. Grandma was preparing signs for the strawberry festival that would begin in just a few days. She handed Logan a paintbrush without hesitation. Can you make my handwriting look better than mine? She joked. Logan smiled with surprising confidence. I can try. For the next hour, we painted colorful wooden signs that pointed visitors toward fresh berries, homemade pies, lemonade, and the petting area for children. Grandma watched Logan carefully whenever she thought he was not looking. There was no suspicion in her eyes, only quiet curiosity. Every time Logan noticed a loose board or a crooked display, he fixed it before anyone had to ask. Every time Grandma thanked him, he looked genuinely surprised, as though simple appreciation was something he still was not used to receiving. As the afternoon slowly faded into early evening, Grandma carried a pitcher of fresh lemonade onto the porch and invited us to take a break. Logan sat beside me on the old wooden steps, stretching his tired arms after hours of work. We watched the breeze ripple through endless rows of strawberry plants glowing beneath the setting sun. Neither of us needed to fill the silence because somehow the quiet itself had become comfortable. Then Logan reached into his notebook once more, carefully removed another folded page, and placed it in my hands. It was a second sketch, newer than the first, and this time both of us were standing together in the middle of the strawberry field, smiling as though we had known each other our entire lives. I could not stop looking at the drawing. The strawberry field stretched across the page exactly the way it looked every evening before sunset, with long rows glowing beneath warm golden light. The details were so careful that I recognized the old oak tree near the fence, the weathered mailbox by the gravel driveway, and even the little white bench where Grandma liked to drink iced tea after finishing her work. But none of those details caught my attention as much as the two people standing together near the middle of the field. Logan had drawn us smiling at each other as though the rest of the world no longer existed. I slowly looked up from the page. You really imagined this before we even became friends? I asked quietly. Logan rubbed the back of his neck, looking almost embarrassed. Not exactly. I imagined what it would feel like if I ever belonged somewhere. His answer settled deep inside me. I had spent my entire life surrounded by this farm, by Grandma's kindness, by neighbors who waved whenever they drove past our mailbox. I had never realized those ordinary things could look extraordinary through someone else's eyes. Before I could think of the right words to answer him, the sky suddenly darkened. A distant rumble rolled across the countryside, and Grandma glanced toward the clouds gathering over the western hills. Looks like a summer storm is coming, she called from the porch. Bring the paint supplies inside before everything gets soaked. Logan and I immediately stood up. We carried the wooden signs, paint cans, brushes, and folding chairs across the yard as the wind began sweeping through the strawberry plants. The first cool drops landed on my hoodie just as we reached the storage barn. Seconds later, heavy rain poured across the farm, drumming loudly against the metal roof until conversation became almost impossible outside. We closed the barn doors halfway to keep the rain from blowing in, leaving only enough space for fresh air and soft gray light to enter. The sudden change from bright sunshine to gentle darkness made the old building feel surprisingly peaceful. The scent of fresh strawberries mixed with the smell of rain and weathered wood, creating the familiar atmosphere I had loved since childhood. Logan leaned against one of the support beams and listened to the rain for a long moment before smiling to himself. I have never heard rain sound like this before, he admitted. In town it just sounds noisy. I smiled. Out here it sounds like the whole farm is breathing. He looked around the barn again, taking everything in with quiet appreciation. You always know how to describe this place. I shrugged. Maybe because it raised me. We sat together on two empty wooden crates while waiting for the storm to pass. Neither of us reached for our phones. Neither of us seemed interested in checking the time. The outside world had disappeared behind sheets of summer rain, leaving only the quiet rhythm of falling water and the peaceful silence between us. After several minutes, Logan spoke so softly that I almost thought the rain had imagined the words for him. When I was younger, I used to think peaceful places like this only existed in movies. I turned toward him. There was no trace of the confident boy everyone at school called the troublemaker. Sitting beside me was simply Logan, someone who had spent far too long believing happiness belonged to other people. What changed your mind? I asked. He looked directly into my eyes, his expression completely sincere. The day you invited me here, I realized I had been wrong. Places like this are real. I just never believed someone like me would be welcomed into one. His words left my heart completely unguarded, and for the first time, I understood that the greatest battle Logan had ever fought was not against the opinions of other people. It was against the quiet voice inside himself that kept insisting he would never deserve to stay. The rain continued tapping gently against the roof, wrapping the old barn in a quiet world that felt completely separate from everything waiting outside. I sat there looking at Logan, wondering how someone who had become so important to me could still believe he deserved so little. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We simply listened to the steady rhythm of the storm, while the cool air carried the sweet scent of fresh strawberries through the open doorway. Finally, I broke the silence. You keep talking as if this place belongs to everyone except you. Logan lowered his eyes and smiled without any happiness behind it. Maybe I have been telling myself that for too many years. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Then tell me something honestly. He looked up. What? When you stopped talking to me after the rumors spread at school, was it because you wanted to stay away from me? His expression changed immediately. The answer reached his face before it reached his voice. No, he admitted quietly. Then why? He took a slow breath and watched the rain sliding down the doorway. Because every time someone looked at us together, I could see what they were thinking. I knew they would start saying things about you. I thought if I disappeared first, you would not have to deal with any of it. I shook my head before he even finished speaking. You never gave me a chance to choose. Logan looked genuinely surprised. I thought I was protecting you. You were deciding for me. He remained silent. I continued before I lost the courage to say what had been trapped inside me for weeks. Do you know what actually hurt? He slowly shook his head. Watching you walk away without asking whether I wanted you to stay. The words hung between us as softly as the rain outside. Logan closed his eyes for a brief moment before letting out a long breath. I never thought anyone would want me to stay. Hearing him say those words felt like discovering a door that had been locked inside him for years. The confident boy everyone feared at school had never been afraid of rumors or gossip. He had been afraid of believing he could matter to someone. I stood up and walked a few steps closer until we were standing only an arm's length apart. He did not move away, but I noticed his hands tighten slightly as though he was afraid even this moment might disappear. Logan, I said softly, look at me. He raised his eyes. You do not have to earn a place here every single day. Grandma likes you because you are kind. I like spending time with you because you make ordinary days feel different. None of that happened by accident. He searched my face carefully, almost as though he expected to find doubt hidden somewhere in my expression. Instead, I smiled. You keep asking yourself whether you deserve happiness. I think you are asking the wrong question. His voice was barely louder than a whisper. Then what is the right question? I felt my heartbeat quicken, but for the first time I did not want to hide what I was feeling. Ask yourself whether you are willing to accept it when it finally finds you. Logan looked at me for what felt like forever. The rain outside softened into a gentle drizzle, and sunlight slowly began returning through the narrow windows high above us. A single golden beam stretched across the wooden floor between us. Logan took one careful step closer, leaving almost no distance between us. His voice trembled ever so slightly, not from fear of me, but from the weight of finally speaking the truth. Ethan, he said, if I take one more step, everything between us changes. I need to know that you are certain before I do anything at all. For a moment, the only sound inside the barn was the last gentle drops of rain falling from the roof. Logan stood in front of me without moving, giving me all the time in the world to decide. There was no pressure in his eyes, only patience and quiet hope. That was when I realized something important. The boy everyone called a troublemaker had always been the one who respected my choices the most. I smiled because my answer had been waiting inside me long before either of us found the courage to ask the question. I am certain, I said softly. I would not still be standing here if I was not. Logan searched my face one more time, making sure my words matched my expression. When he finally believed me, he took one careful step forward. The distance between us disappeared so naturally that it felt as though we had been walking toward this moment ever since the day Mrs. Harper assigned us to the same desk. He lifted one hand slowly, giving me every chance to step away if I wanted. Instead, I gently placed my hand in his. His fingers were warm, but I could feel the slightest tremble. I smiled again. You are nervous. He laughed quietly, shaking his head. More nervous than I have ever been before. Even more nervous than the day you stood in front of the whole school during the academic assembly? He nodded without hesitation. Not even close. That answer made me laugh, and somehow the last bit of tension between us disappeared. We stood there smiling at each other while sunlight slowly returned through the barn windows. Outside, the rain had almost stopped, leaving tiny drops sparkling on every strawberry plant across the field. Everything looked brighter than it had only a few minutes earlier. Logan looked into my eyes and spoke with complete honesty. "You changed my life, Ethan." I shook my head gently. "No, you changed your own life. I only opened the gate." He smiled in a way I had never seen before, completely free of the doubt he usually carried. "Then thank you for leaving it open." Neither of us rushed the next moment. There was no dramatic music, no audience, and no need to prove anything to anyone. We simply stood together while the quiet afternoon wrapped around us. Logan leaned forward just enough to silently ask one final question without speaking it aloud. I answered by closing the small distance between us myself. Our first kiss was brief, gentle, and filled with more relief than surprise. It was not about hiding from the world or escaping the rumors that had followed us for weeks. It was simply two people finally admitting what had already become obvious inside their hearts. When we stepped back, neither of us spoke immediately. We just smiled, almost laughing because everything felt both completely new and strangely familiar at the same time. Logan looked happier than I had ever seen him, yet his eyes were still shining with disbelief. "Did that really happen?" he asked quietly. "It did," I answered, "and I am not taking it back." He laughed softly, the sound echoing through the old barn. Before I could say anything else, the peaceful silence was interrupted by the slow creak of the wooden door behind us. We turned at the exact same moment. My grandmother stood in the doorway holding a folded umbrella under one arm and two clean towels in her hands. She looked at me first, then at Logan, then at our embarrassed expressions. For several endless seconds, nobody moved at all. Finally, Grandma gave us the same calm smile she always wore after catching me making a harmless mistake as a kid. "Dinner is going to get cold if you boys stay out here much longer," she said gently before turning around and walking back toward the farmhouse, leaving Logan and me standing there with our hearts racing for an entirely different reason. Neither of us moved after Grandma disappeared down the path toward the farmhouse. Logan remained exactly where he was, staring at the half-open barn door as though it might suddenly swing open again. Then he slowly covered his face with both hands and let out the longest sigh I had ever heard. "Please tell me that did not actually happen," he said through an embarrassed laugh. I could not help smiling. I wish I could. He looked at me with bright red cheeks and shook his head. I have faced angry teachers, impossible exams, and an entire school that thought I was the worst person in the building. Somehow none of those things were as terrifying as your grandmother quietly opening that door. I laughed so hard that I nearly lost my balance against one of the wooden shelves. I never thought I would see the famous Troublemaker completely speechless. Logan pointed toward me with a playful expression. "Do not get used to it." I grinned. Too late. He laughed with me, and the nervous tension that had filled the barn only moments earlier slowly began to disappear. Outside, the clouds drifted apart, allowing warm evening sunlight to spread across the strawberry fields once again. Tiny drops of rain sparkled on the leaves like scattered pieces of glass. It was beautiful enough that anyone else might have forgotten what had just happened. We definitely could not. Logan rubbed the back of his neck and looked toward the farmhouse again. "Do you think your grandmother is angry?" I thought carefully before answering. "If she was angry, you would know." He blinked. "Really?" I nodded. "Grandma has never been the kind of person who hides how she feels. If she smiled, she meant it." Logan looked relieved for almost 2 seconds before another worried thought crossed his face. "That somehow makes me even more nervous." I raised an eyebrow. "How?" He smiled awkwardly. "Because now I have absolutely no idea what she is thinking." We started walking back toward the house together, our shoes crunching softly over the damp gravel path. The air smelled fresh after the rain, and the cool breeze carried the sweet scent of strawberries through the entire farm. As we reached the porch steps, Logan suddenly stopped. I turned around. He was looking down at his hands instead of at me. "Ethan," he said quietly, "if your grandmother tells you that she does not want me coming here anymore, I will understand." My smile disappeared immediately. "Why would you even think that?" He shrugged, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes again. "Because people are usually kind until things become complicated." I stepped closer and gently rested my hand on his shoulder. You have spent so much time expecting the worst that you cannot recognize the best when it is standing right in front of you. He looked at me without speaking. Grandma invited you here because she likes having you around. She trusted you before either of us admitted how we felt. One awkward moment is not going to erase everything she already knows about you. Logan let out a slow breath, and I noticed his shoulders finally relax. I hope you are right, he whispered. Before I could answer, the screen door opened with its familiar squeak. Grandma leaned outside, drying her hands with a kitchen towel. She looked directly at Logan with the same gentle smile she had worn all afternoon. Are you two planning to admire the weather all evening? She asked warmly. Or are you coming inside before my chicken pot pie gets cold? Logan looked at me in complete surprise. I smiled and quietly nudged his arm. I told you, I whispered. She is still inviting you to dinner. He smiled back, but I could still see one question lingering quietly behind his eyes, because deep down he knew the real conversation had not happened yet, and whatever Grandma wanted to ask him would probably matter far more than the moment she had accidentally witnessed inside the barn. The warm smell of Grandma's chicken pot pie filled the kitchen the moment we stepped inside, but even my favorite meal could not distract me from the quiet tension hanging around the dinner table. Logan politely pulled out Grandma's chair before sitting across from me, thanking her again for inviting him. She smiled with genuine appreciation and passed him a basket of fresh dinner rolls as though this were any other evening. Watching the two of them interact almost made me believe I had imagined everything that happened in the barn. Almost. We filled our plates while Grandma talked about the strawberry festival, reminding me to help set up the welcome booth before visitors arrived on Saturday morning. She asked Logan whether the repaired irrigation pipe was working properly, and he explained that it should last for many more seasons with only routine maintenance. She nodded with obvious approval. Your grandfather would have liked that answer, she said. He always believed that fixing something properly the first time saved everyone trouble later. Logan smiled politely, but I noticed he lowered his eyes for a moment after hearing the compliment. We continued eating in comfortable silence until Grandma poured another glass of iced tea and gently folded her hands on the table. She looked directly at Logan, not with suspicion or disappointment, but with the calm expression that always meant she wanted an honest conversation. Logan, she said softly. May I ask you something important? He immediately set down his fork. Of course, ma'am. She nodded once. What exactly are your intentions with my grandson? The room became completely quiet. Even the ticking clock above the refrigerator suddenly seemed louder than before. Logan did not answer right away. Instead, he looked toward me for just a second before turning back to Grandma. I care about Ethan very much, he said carefully. More than I ever expected to care about anyone. Grandma listened without interrupting. Logan took a slow breath before continuing. I know people at school have said many things about me. Some of them are true. Most of them are not. But I want you to know one thing with complete honesty. I have never wanted to bring trouble into Ethan's life. If anything, I spent weeks trying to stay away from him because I thought he deserved someone better than me. I quietly shook my head, remembering our conversation in the barn, but I let him finish. Then why did you stop staying away? Grandma asked gently. Logan looked at me again, and this time he smiled with quiet certainty. Because Ethan made me understand that protecting someone does not mean making their choices for them. He chose to trust me even after everyone else had already decided who I was. Grandma remained silent for several thoughtful seconds before speaking again. Do you know what worries every grandparent the most? Logan answered honestly. Whether someone they love will get hurt. Grandma nodded. Exactly. She rested her hand lightly on the table. I do not expect either of you to have every answer today. You are both still learning who you are. But I do expect kindness, honesty, and respect. Those things matter much more to me than rumors or first impressions. Logan's shoulders relaxed as though he had finally been allowed to breathe again. I can promise you all three, he replied sincerely. Grandma smiled warmly. Good. Because I have watched you all afternoon. I saw how you helped without being asked, how you treated my grandson, and how you listened instead of trying to impress anyone. Those things tell me far more about your character than gossip ever could. I felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over me. But before I could say anything, a notification sounded from Logan's phone resting beside his plate. He glanced at the screen, and the color immediately drained from his face. Without saying a word, He turned the phone over so the display faced the table, but I had already caught a glimpse of a photo showing the two of us walking back from the barn together, followed by a single message that read, "See you both at school on Monday." The message stayed on my mind long after dinner ended. Logan slipped his phone back into his pocket without opening the conversation again, but I could see the worry returning to his eyes. It was the same look I had watched him carry through the school hallways for months, the expression of someone who always expected peace to disappear the moment it finally arrived. Grandma quietly gathered the empty plates before either of us could offer to help. "You boys can wash the dishes," she said with an easy smile. "I cooked. You clean." It felt like the most ordinary sentence in the world, and somehow that ordinary moment reminded me that nothing important had been taken away from us. Logan stood beside me at the kitchen sink while I rinsed the plates, and he dried them with a clean towel. Neither of us mentioned the mysterious message. We simply worked together in comfortable silence until every dish was back in its proper place. Grandma watched us from the living room, pretending to read a gardening magazine, even though I noticed she smiled every time she glanced in our direction. When everything was finished, Logan thanked her once again for dinner and offered to carry the trash to the outside bin before leaving. Grandma accepted with a grateful nod. As soon as he stepped onto the back porch, I followed him into the cool evening air. The rain had completely disappeared, leaving the farm wrapped in the soft, golden glow of porch lights stretching toward the strawberry fields. Crickets had begun their nightly songs, and a gentle breeze carried the familiar sweet scent that always reminded me of home. Logan stopped near the old white fence and looked out across the quiet rows of strawberry plants. "I am sorry," he said unexpectedly. I frowned. "For what?" He looked down at the gravel beneath his shoes. "For bringing another problem into your life. Whoever sent that picture obviously wants us to worry." I shook my head immediately. "Then let them waste their time. I already know who you are. Grandma knows who you are. That matters more than one anonymous message." He looked at me carefully, searching for even the smallest sign of doubt. He did not find any. A slow smile finally returned to his face. "You really are impossible to scare away." I laughed softly. "I learned from the toughest person at Westbrook High." He smiled and gently bumped my shoulder with his. "People are going to keep talking." "Probably," I admitted. "Then what do we do?" I looked across the field where tiny lights from the farmhouse reflected on the damp leaves after the storm. "We keep living our lives until they run out of things to say." Logan nodded slowly, and for the first time since the phone notification interrupted dinner, I watched the weight leave his shoulders again. Before heading to his car, he reached into his backpack and carefully handed me the sketch of both of us standing together in the strawberry field. "Keep it," he said. "I do not need to imagine that future anymore." I held the drawing close, smiling as he walked toward the driveway. Halfway to his car, he turned around and waved. I waved back until his headlights disappeared beyond the old mailbox at the end of the road. Grandma quietly stepped onto the porch beside me, wrapping a light sweater around her shoulders. She looked at the drawing in my hands, and then toward the empty driveway. "He seems like a good young man," she said gently. I smiled without taking my eyes off the place where Logan's car had disappeared. "He is." Grandma nodded once. "Then make sure both of you remember that kindness is stronger than rumors." I folded the sketch carefully and slipped it into my hoodie pocket. Looking out over the endless rows of strawberries glowing beneath the evening sky, I realized our story had never really been about being accepted by everyone else. It had always been about finding the courage to believe the people who truly cared for us. And as I reached into my pocket one last time before going inside, my phone quietly lit up with a new message from Logan that simply read, "Thank you for choosing me. I promise I will keep choosing you too."